That's cute. You talk like those motivational ladies on YouTube. The words hit Salama like ice water. She sat across from Bryce Langford, CEO of one of New York's hottest logistics startups, watching his smug smile spread wider as he leaned back in his leather chair. She had just answered his technical question flawlessly, explained how to optimize supply chain efficiency using predictive analytics, but all he heard was her Nigerian accent. I meant no offense, he continued, waving his hand dismissively, but maybe customer service would suit you better. You know, something more fitting. Before we continue with this incredible story of transformation, I need you to hit that like button and drop a comment below. Your engagement helps YouTube promote this video to others who need to hear Salama's powerful journey. Trust me, what happens next will completely change how you think about rejection and success. That moment in the sterile Manhattan office would become the catalyst for one of the most remarkable business comebacks in recent history. Salama Okafor had traveled 5,000 miles from Lagos to New York with nothing but a computer science degree, $3,000 in savings, and an unshakable belief that her voice mattered. She had survived 3 months of rejections, living in a cramped studio apartment in Queens, eating ramen noodles for dinner, and watching her bank account shrink daily. But Bryce Langford's casual cruelty would prove to be the worst mistake of his career. Because the woman sitting across from him, the one he dismissed for her accent, would eventually build a logistics empire that would make his company look like a corner store. She would become the most powerful woman in African supply chain management, connecting 14 countries and generating over $38 million in impact revenue. She would speak at conferences where industry leaders hung on her every word, accent and all. And yes, she would eventually walk back into a room where Bryce Langford sat, but this time, he would be the one struggling to stay relevant while she commanded the stage. This is the story of how one moment of humiliation became the foundation for extraordinary success. How a woman refused to change her voice to fit someone else's comfort zone. How love found her when she stopped looking for approval. And how the very thing that made others underestimate her became her greatest strength. Salama thanked Bryce politely that day, walked out of his office with her head high, and cried in the bathroom downstairs. But those tears weren't just from pain, they were from determination. Because sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up teaching us exactly who we're meant to become. What Bryce didn't know was that he had just awakened something powerful in Salama. Something that would change not just her life, but the lives of thousands of African entrepreneurs who would benefit from the empire she was about to build. This is her story. The JFK Airport arrivals hall buzzed with controlled chaos as Salama Okafor wheeled her single suitcase through the automatic doors. The October air hit her face, crisp, foreign, full of possibility and uncertainty. She clutched her phone, checking the address of the hostel in Queens she'd booked for 2 weeks. 2 weeks to find a job, find an apartment, find her footing in the city that never sleeps. Welcome to America, she whispered to herself, her Nigerian accent thick with exhaustion from the 14-hour flight from Lagos. The subway ride to Queens was a sensory overload. Bodies pressed together, conversations in languages she couldn't identify. The screech of metal on metal as the train rounded corners. She studied the faces around her, tired commuters heading home, young professionals, scrolling through phones, elderly women clutching purses. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged. Everyone except her. The hostel was a converted brownstone with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. Her room was barely larger than a closet, with a twin bed, a small desk, and a window that looked out onto a fire escape. She sat on the thin mattress and opened her laptop, the familiar blue glow illuminating her determined face. Logistics coordinator. Manhattan startup seeks dynamic individual. Supply chain analyst. Fortune 500 company requires. Operations manager. Fast-growing tech company. She bookmarked 17 job postings that first night, crafting cover letters until 3 a.m. Her computer science degree from the University of Lagos was solid, her internship experience at a shipping company impressive, but she knew the American job market was different, more competitive, more demanding. The next morning, she walked through Manhattan for the first time. The skyscrapers stretched endlessly upward, glass and steel monuments to ambition. Wall Street bustled with suited figures moving with purpose. She stopped at a coffee cart, ordering her first American coffee. "That'll be $4.50, the vendor said. $4.50 for coffee. In Lagos, she could eat lunch for that amount. She handed over the money, calculating how long her savings would last at this rate. Her first interview was at a mid-sized logistics firm in Midtown. The receptionist, a blonde woman with perfectly manicured nails, looked her up and down when she announced herself. "Salama. How do you pronounce that again?" "Salama," she replied patiently. "Right. Mr. Peterson will see you shortly." The waiting area was all glass and chrome, with magazines she'd never heard of fanned across a marble table. She reviewed her notes one final time, practicing answers to common interview questions. When Mr. Peterson emerged, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a firm handshake, she felt confident. "So Salama, tell me about your experience with international shipping protocols." She launched into a detailed explanation of her work optimizing container routes between Lagos and European ports, how she'd reduced transit times by 15% through better coordination with customs officials. Peterson nodded politely, but she could see his attention drifting. "That's interesting," he said when she finished. "But we're really looking for someone with American market experience. Someone who understands how things work here." "I'm a quick learner," she replied. "I've studied American logistics standards extensively, and I believe my international perspective could bring value." "I'm sure it could," Peterson interrupted gently. "But we need someone who can hit the ground running." "Thanks for coming in." The second interview went similarly. The third was worse. The hiring manager spent most of the time explaining why her degree might not translate properly to American standards. By the fourth rejection, she'd stopped taking notes on their feedback. Walking back to the hostel that evening, she passed a group of young professionals celebrating at a rooftop bar. Their laughter drifted down to the street, carefree and confident. She wondered if she'd ever feel that sense of belonging, that easy comfort in her own skin in this new place. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother in Lagos. "How is the job search going, my dear?" She typed back, "Very well, Mama. Many opportunities here." The lie came easily. Her mother had sacrificed so much to help fund this journey, working double shifts at the hospital, selling her gold jewelry, believing in her daughter's American dream. Salama couldn't bear to disappoint her, not yet. Back in her tiny room, she opened her laptop again. The job boards seemed endless, but the requirements all blurred together. 5+ years American experience, native English speaker preferred, must be authorized to work in the U.S. That last one she had covered. Her work visa was solid, but the others felt like insurmountable walls. She video called her best friend Kemi back in Lagos. "Girl, you look tired," Kemi said, her face filling the screen. "It's harder than I expected," Salama admitted. "They keep saying I don't have the right experience, but how do I get American experience if no one will hire me?" "You're brilliant, Sal. They'll see it eventually." "What if they don't? What if I'm just fooling myself thinking I can make it here?" Kemi's expression grew serious. "Remember when you redesigned the entire shipping system at Okonkwo Industries? Remember how the CEO said you saved them millions? That wasn't luck. That was you being exceptional." After they hung up, Salama stared at her reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back at her seemed smaller somehow, diminished by weeks of rejection. But her eyes still held fire. She opened a new browser tab and searched for more job postings. Tomorrow would bring new interviews, new opportunities, new chances to prove herself. She'd come too far to give up now. The city hummed outside her window, millions of people chasing their own dreams, facing their own struggles. She was just one more voice in the chorus, but she was determined to make hers heard. Her savings account showed $2,247 remaining. Rent at the hostel was $40 per night. Food was expensive. Everything was expensive. But quitting wasn't an option. She pulled out a notebook and wrote at the top of a fresh page, Day 12 in New York. Still standing? Tomorrow, she had 3 more interviews scheduled. One of them had to work out. One of them had to see past her accent, past her foreign degree, past their preconceptions about what success looked like. One of them had to give her a chance. 3 weeks into her New York journey, Salama received an email that made her heart race. Logiflow Dynamics, one of the city's fastest-growing logistics startups, wanted to interview her for a senior operations analyst position. The company had been featured in TechCrunch twice that month, and their CEO, Bryce Langford, was being hailed as the next big thing in supply chain innovation. She researched everything about the company. Founded 2 years earlier with $15 million in venture capital, Logiflow promised to revolutionize last-mile delivery through AI-powered route optimization. Their client list included 3 Fortune 500 companies, and they were expanding rapidly across the East Coast. The night before the interview, she practiced in front of her hostel room mirror, perfecting her answers about machine learning applications in logistics, cost reduction strategies, and scalability challenges. She'd even prepared specific suggestions for how Logiflow could expand into emerging markets, particularly Africa, where her expertise could prove invaluable. The Logiflow offices occupied 2 floors of a gleaming tower in Soho. The lobby featured exposed brick walls, modern art installations, and a reception desk made from reclaimed wood. Young employees in designer jeans and expensive sneakers moved through the space with casual confidence. Laptops tucked under their arms, discussing algorithms and market penetration over artisanal coffee. Salama Okafor for Bryce Langford, she told the receptionist, a 20-something woman with purple hair and multiple ear piercings. Cool name, the receptionist said, typing on her MacBook. He'll be right with you. Want some kombucha while you wait? Salama declined politely, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent back in Lagos. She watched the controlled chaos of startup life, ping-pong games in the break area, impromptu, meetings around standing desks, walls covered with sticky notes and flowcharts. Salama. She turned to see a man approaching, mid-30s with perfectly styled, brown hair and a smile that belonged in a toothpaste commercial. He wore dark jeans, a crisp white button-down, and sneakers that she recognized as limited edition Jordans worth at least $800. Bryce Langford, he said, extending his hand. Thanks for coming in. His handshake was firm but brief, and she noticed how his eyes quickly assessed her, taking in her conservative blazer, her modest heels, her carefully straightened hair. She'd dressed professionally, but in this environment of calculated casualness, she suddenly felt overdressed and underprepared. Great space, she said as they walked toward his office. Thanks. We just expanded. Growth has been insane. He gestured broadly at the bustling floor. Sometimes I can't believe this all started in my Columbia dorm room. His office was a study in millennial executive aesthetics. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River, a standing desk with multiple monitors, motivational quotes printed on expensive paper and framed in sleek black frames. Move fast and break things. Disrupt or be disrupted. Think different. So, Bryce said, settling into his chair and opening her resume on his laptop. Tell me about your background. Salama launched into her prepared introduction, explaining her computer science degree, her work optimizing shipping routes in West Africa, her passion for using technology to solve complex logistical challenges. She spoke clearly and confidently, her Nigerian accent lending gravity to her words. Bryce nodded along, but she could see his attention wandering. He glanced at his phone twice, checked his Apple Watch, and seemed more interested in the view outside than her qualifications. That's interesting, he said when she finished. Now, I have to ask, and this is just me being practical, how do you think our clients would respond to, well, to your communication style? My communication style? She repeated, confused. Look, I'm all for diversity. We have people from everywhere here. India, China, Eastern Europe. But most of our clients are traditional American companies. They expect a certain presentation. The room suddenly felt smaller. Salama straightened in her chair, choosing her words carefully. I believe clear communication transcends accent, Mr. Langford. My previous clients valued my insights regardless of how I delivered them. I'm sure they did, he said, leaning back with that practiced smile. But let me give you a real-world scenario. Say you're presenting our Q3 efficiency metrics to the board of directors at Walmart. These are conservative executives, mostly older white men from Arkansas. How do you think they'd respond to your presentation style? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Salama felt her pulse quicken, but she maintained her composure. I think they'd respond to accurate data and actionable insights, regardless of who presents them. Right, but here's the thing. Bryce pulled up a technical diagram on his screen. Can you walk me through how you'd optimize this distribution network? She studied the diagram for 30 seconds, then began explaining her approach. She identified 3 bottlenecks in the current system, suggested implementing predictive analytics to anticipate demand fluctuations, and outlined a phased approach to reducing transportation costs by 20% while improving delivery times. Her analysis was thorough, innovative, and demonstrated deep understanding of both the technical and business implications. She spoke for 5 minutes without notes, drawing connections between different aspects of the system that even impressed herself. When she finished, Bryce was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, not the professional smile from earlier, but something more condescending. "That's cute," he said, the words dropping like stones into still water. "You talk like those motivational ladies on YouTube." The comment hit her like a physical blow. She blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me? I meant no offense," he continued, waving his hand dismissively. "But maybe customer service would suit you better. You know, something more fitting for your skill set." The silence stretched between them. Outside, she could hear the muffled sounds of the office, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the distant laughter of employees who belonged in this world in ways she apparently didn't. "I see," she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her chest. "Look, you seem smart," Bryce said, already closing her resume file. "But we need someone who can represent Logiflow at the highest levels. Someone our clients will immediately connect with. I'm sure you understand." She understood perfectly. She understood that her 5 years of experience meant nothing, that her innovative solutions were dismissed as cute, that her accent, the same accent that had commanded respect in boardrooms across Lagos, was seen as a liability here. "Thank you for your time," she said, standing and extending her hand. Bryce shook it briefly, already reaching for his phone. "We'll be in touch." They both knew he wouldn't be. Salama walked through the bustling office, past the ping-pong tables and motivational posters, past the young employees who belonged in ways she never would. The elevator ride down felt endless, each floor marking another step away from the opportunities she'd prepared for so carefully. In the lobby, she maintained her composure until she reached the street. Then she walked 3 blocks, found a Starbucks bathroom, locked the door, and cried. 2 days after the Logiflow humiliation, Salama's savings had dwindled to $1,847. The hostel manager, a kind but business-minded woman named Rosa, had started, giving her sympathetic looks that said pay up or move out without words. Desperation had a way of making even the most unlikely opportunities seem golden. That's how she found herself standing outside a nondescript warehouse in Long Island City, Queens, staring at a handwritten sign taped to a glass door. Administrative assistant needed immediate start. Inquire within. The building looked nothing like the gleaming startup offices she'd been visiting. Gray concrete walls, small windows, and the constant rumble of trucks loading and unloading goods. This wasn't her dream job, but dreams didn't pay rent. Inside, the reception area consisted of a metal desk, 2 folding chairs, and a coffee maker that had seen better decades. Behind the desk sat a woman in her 40s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked up from a stack of invoices, her brown eyes kind but tired. "You hear about the job?" she asked in accented English. Dominican, Salama guessed. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Salama Okafor. Lourdes Martinez," the woman replied, standing to shake her hand. "You have experience with computers?" "I have a degree in computer science and 5 years of logistics experience." Lourdes raised an eyebrow. "Computer science? What are you doing here? This is data entry, filing, answering phones. Probably boring for someone like you." "I need work," Salama said simply. "I'm good with details, I learn quickly, and I show up on time." Something in her tone must have convinced Lourdes, because the older woman nodded slowly. "Okay. Let me show you around, then we talk to Mr. Chen." The warehouse was larger than it appeared from outside. Rows of metal shelving stretched toward a high ceiling, filled with boxes labeled in multiple languages. Forklifts moved between the aisles like mechanical dancers, their operators calling out to each other in Spanish, English, and what sounded like Mandarin. "We handle imports for small businesses," Lord explained as they walked. "Restaurants, grocery stores, specialty shops. Nothing fancy, but steady work. Mr. Chen started this place 20 years ago with 1 truck and a dream. They passed a break room where several workers sat around a table, sharing lunch from containers that smelled like home cooking. A few looked up and nodded at Lourdes, their faces curious but welcoming when they saw Salama. "Most of us here, we came from somewhere else," Lourdes continued. "Mr. Chen from Taiwan, me from Santo Domingo, Carlos over there from El Salvador. We understand what it's like to start over." Mr. Chen's office was cramped but organized, with shipping schedules taped to every available wall surface. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and calloused hands that spoke of years of physical work before he could afford to hire others. "Lourdes says you're overqualified," he said without preamble, looking over a resume that Salama had hastily printed at a FedEx store. "I'm qualified for what you need," she replied, "and I'm available to start immediately." He studied her for a long moment. "This job pays $12 an hour, no benefits for the first 90 days. You sure you want this?" $12 an hour was less than she'd made as an intern in Lagos. But it was enough to cover the hostel and basic expenses while she continued job hunting. "Yes, sir. Okay. You start Monday. Lourdes will train you." That was it. No questions about her accent, no concerns about client presentations, no suggestions that she might be better suited for something else. Just a job offer based on her willingness to work. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Salama took the subway to Queens, her laptop bag replaced by a simple purse and a notebook. The warehouse felt different as an employee, less intimidating, more purposeful. Lourdes started her with basic tasks, updating inventory spreadsheets, processing shipping documents, answering phones. The work was straightforward, but Salama quickly noticed inefficiencies in their systems. Their inventory tracking was done on paper and transferred to Excel sheets manually. Customer orders were processed through a combination of email, phone calls, and handwritten notes. "How long does it usually take to process an order?" she asked Lourdes during her second week. "Depends. Simple orders, maybe 2 hours. Complex ones with multiple suppliers could be a full day. What if we created a digital workflow, something that could track orders from initial request through delivery?" Lourdes looked skeptical. "Mr. Chen doesn't like change. He says the old way works fine." But Salama had already started sketching ideas in her notebook. During lunch breaks, she designed a simple database system that could streamline their entire operation. She researched free software solutions that could integrate with their existing processes without requiring major investment. 3 weeks into the job, she worked up the courage to approach Mr. Chen. "I have some ideas for improving our efficiency," she said, standing in his doorway with her notebook. He looked up from a shipping manifest, his expression neutral. "What kind of ideas?" She spent 20 minutes explaining her proposed system, showing him flowcharts and cost-benefit analyses she'd prepared on her own time. He listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "How much would this cost?" he asked finally. "The software is free. Implementation would just require time to set it up and train everyone. And you know how to do this?" "Yes, sir. I could have a pilot version running by next week." Mr. Chen was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Show me." Working evenings and weekends, Salama built a prototype system using open-source database software. She created user-friendly interfaces for order entry, inventory tracking, and customer communication. The system was elegant in its simplicity, powerful enough to handle their complex logistics needs but intuitive enough for employees with limited computer experience. When she demonstrated the system to Mr. Chen and Lourdes, their reactions exceeded her expectations. "This could cut our processing time in half," Lourdes said, clicking through the interface with growing excitement. "Maybe more," Mr. Chen added, studying the automated reporting features. "How did you learn to do this?" "I've been working with logistics systems for years," Salama replied. "I just adapted what I knew to fit your needs." That afternoon, Mr. Chen called her into his office again. "I'm promoting you to operations coordinator," he said. $15 an hour, benefits start immediately, and I want you to implement this system company-wide." For the first time since arriving in New York, Salama felt something she'd almost forgotten. The satisfaction of being valued for her abilities rather than judged for her differences. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," he replied. "Lourdes was right about you. You're exactly what we needed." 6 months after implementing her digital system at Chen Logistics, Salama had transformed from an overqualified administrative assistant into the company's most valuable asset. The efficiency improvements were undeniable. Order processing time had dropped by 60%, customer complaints had virtually disappeared, and their client base had grown by 40% through word-of-mouth referrals. Mr. Chen called her into his office on a Tuesday morning in March, his usual serious expression softened by something that might have been pride. "Salama, I've been thinking," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "We're getting too big for me to handle everything myself. I need someone to manage our day-to-day operations while I focus on business development." She leaned forward, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" "Operations manager. You'd oversee the warehouse staff, manage client relationships, and continue improving our systems. $22 an hour, plus performance bonuses." The promotion came with a small office, really just a converted storage room with a window. But it was hers. More importantly, it came with authority to make real changes. Her first challenge was managing a team of 12 warehouse workers, most of whom had been there longer than she'd been in America. Carlos Mendoza, the lead forklift operator, was initially skeptical. A stocky man in his 50s with 20 years of warehouse experience. He'd seen plenty of college graduates come and go with big ideas and little practical knowledge. "No offense, boss," he said during their first team meeting, "but you ever actually loaded a truck?" "No," Salama admitted, "but I've spent the last 6 months learning how this operation works from the ground up. I'm not here to change everything overnight. I'm here to make your jobs easier and our company stronger." She proved her commitment by spending her first week as manager working alongside the warehouse crew. She learned to operate the inventory scanners, helped load trucks during busy periods, and listened to the workers' suggestions for improving workflow. Maria Santos, one of the newer employees, mentioned that the loading dock got congested during peak hours because trucks arrived randomly throughout the day. "What if we scheduled delivery windows?" Salama suggested. "Give each truck a specific time slot, spread the workload more evenly." "Drivers won't like it," Carlos warned. "They're used to showing up whenever." "Let me handle the drivers," Salama said. She spent 2 weeks calling every regular delivery company, explaining the benefits of scheduled slots, reduced waiting time, faster loading, better customer service. Some drivers grumbled, but most appreciated the predictability. Within a month, the loading dock ran like clockwork. Her next innovation addressed their biggest operational challenge: inventory accuracy. Despite the digital system, they still had discrepancies between what the computer showed and what was actually on the shelves. "The problem is timing," she explained to Lourdes during one of their weekly check-ins. "We update inventory when shipments arrive, but not when items are damaged or misplaced." She implemented a real-time tracking system using handheld scanners. Every movement of inventory, incoming, outgoing, damaged or relocated, was immediately logged into the database. The accuracy rate jumped from 85% to 98% within 2 months. But her biggest test came when Chen Logistics landed their largest client, yet a chain of specialty food stores expanding across the Northeast. The contract would double their business volume, but it required capabilities they didn't currently have: temperature-controlled storage, specialized handling procedures, and integration with the client's own inventory management system. "Can we handle this, Mr. Chen asked during an emergency meeting. Salama had already been running numbers. "We'll need to lease additional refrigerated space, hire 4 more workers, and upgrade our software integration capabilities. Initial investment would be about $80,000, but the contract value is $2.4 million over 3 years. That's a big risk," Lourdes said. "What if something goes wrong? What if something goes right?" Salama countered. "This client could be our gateway to the premium market. Other specialty retailers will notice our capabilities." Mr. Chen was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Do it. But you're in charge of implementation." The next 6 weeks were the most intense of Salama's career. She coordinated with contractors to install refrigeration units, developed training protocols for handling perishable goods, and worked 18-hour days to integrate their systems with the client's requirements. The night before their first major delivery, she stood in the warehouse at 11 p.m., watching her team run through final preparations. Carlos was training 2 new hires on proper temperature monitoring procedures. Maria was testing the barcode scanners to ensure seamless integration with the client's tracking system. Lourdes was reviewing shipping manifests. One final time. "You think we're ready?" Carlos asked, joining her near the loading dock. "I think we're about to find out," she replied. The first delivery went flawlessly. Trucks loaded on schedule, temperatures maintained perfectly, inventory tracking synchronized without errors. The client's regional manager called Mr. Chen personally to express his satisfaction. "Your operations manager knows what she's doing," he said. "We'd like to discuss expanding our partnership." Word of their success spread quickly through the industry. Within 3 months, Chen Logistics had inquiries from 6 other specialty retailers. Mr. Chen hired Salama as his official second-in-command, with a salary that finally reflected her contributions. But the real validation came from her team. During the company's annual barbecue, Carlos stood up to make an impromptu speech. "When Salama first became our manager, I thought she was just another college kid who didn't understand real work," he said, raising his beer. "I was wrong. She listens to us, she works harder than any of us, and she's made this place better for everyone. To the best boss I've ever had." The applause was genuine, warm, and earned. Salama felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around at faces that had become family, people who valued her for her contributions, not despite her accent. That evening, as she walked through the warehouse one final time before locking up, she thought about Bryce Langford and his dismissive comments about her communication style. He'd been wrong about so many things, but mostly about what mattered in leadership. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How is work going, my dear?" This time her response was completely honest. "Better than I ever imagined, Mama. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She wasn't lying anymore. For the first time since arriving in New York, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Not because she'd changed to fit in, but because she'd found people who appreciated what she brought to the table. The warehouse was quiet now, but tomorrow it would buzz with activity again. Orders to process, problems to solve, improvements to implement, and she'd be ready for all of it. The New York Logistics and Supply Chain Summit wasn't the kind of event Salama would have attended a year earlier. But as operations manager of Chen Logistics, she now had a professional development budget and Mr. Chen's encouragement to network within the industry. The conference was held at the Marriott in Times Square, a world away from the warehouse in Queens. Salama wore her best blazer, navy blue, purchased specifically for occasions like this, and carried business cards with her new title printed in crisp black letters. The main ballroom buzzed with conversations about blockchain integration, autonomous delivery vehicles, and supply chain sustainability. She moved through the crowd, listening more than speaking, absorbing insights about industry trends that could benefit Chen Logistics. At the coffee station during the afternoon break, she found herself standing behind a man in his early 30s with dark hair and an easy smile. He was Greek-American, she guessed from his features, wearing a well-tailored gray suit that suggested success without ostentation. "Excuse me," he said, turning as she reached for a cup. "You're from Chen Logistics, right? I saw your name tag." "Yes, Salama Okafor," she replied, extending her hand. "Nico Stavros, Stavros Maritime Solutions." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his smile genuine. "I've heard good things about your company. Word is you've been revolutionizing operations for specialty food distributors." She was surprised he knew about their recent success. News travels fast in this industry, especially good news. "Mind if I ask what you're drinking? The coffee here is terrible, but I noticed you added something that made it smell actually appealing." She laughed, showing him the small container of cardamom she'd brought from home. "Old habit from Lagos, makes everything taste better." "Lagos? Nigeria?" "Yes." "You know it?" "I've shipped cargo through a Papa port several times. Challenging logistics environment, but incredible potential. Your experience there must give you a unique perspective on supply chain optimization." Most people, when they learned she was from Nigeria, either changed the subject or asked vague questions about Africa as if it were a single country. Nico's specific knowledge of Lagos's main port suggested genuine professional interest rather than polite curiosity. They talked for 20 minutes about West African shipping challenges, the potential for technology to improve port efficiency, and the growing importance of emerging markets in global supply chains. His questions were thoughtful, his insights sharp, and he listened to her responses with the kind of attention that suggested he valued her expertise. "I should get back to the sessions," she said finally, glancing at her watch. "Of course, but would you be interested in continuing this conversation over dinner? There's a great Greek place in Astoria, authentic food, nothing fancy, but the owner makes the best moussaka outside of Athens." She hesitated. Professional networking was one thing, but dinner felt more personal. "I don't usually—" "Just dinner," he said quickly. "Two logistics professionals talking shop. I promise not to try to sell you anything." Something in his tone, respectful, patient, genuinely interested, made her nod. "Okay, but I choose the restaurant. There's a Nigerian place in Brooklyn that makes the best jollof rice in New York." His face lit up. "Even better. I've never had authentic Nigerian food." 3 days later, they met at Mama Aduni's in Crown Heights. The restaurant was small, family-owned, with plastic tablecloths, and the kind of atmosphere that prioritized flavor over ambiance. Salama had called ahead to warn them she was bringing a guest who'd never experienced Nigerian cuisine. Nico arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a casual button-down that made him seem more approachable than the suited professional from the conference. He looked around the restaurant with curiosity rather than judgment, taking in the Afrobeat music, the colorful artwork, the intoxicating aromas from the kitchen. "This smells incredible," he said as they were seated. Salama ordered for both of them, jollof rice, grilled tilapia, plantains, and pepper soup as an appetizer. She watched his face as he tasted each dish, pleased by his genuine appreciation for the complex flavors. "This is amazing," he said, after trying the jollof rice. "The spice blend is so sophisticated. How do they get the rice to absorb all these flavors?" She explained the cooking process, the importance of using the right type of rice, the regional variations in preparation. He asked intelligent questions, made connections to Greek cooking techniques, and shared stories about his grandmother's kitchen in Astoria. "My Yia would love this place," he said. "She always says the best food comes from cooks who learned from their mothers, not from culinary school." As the evening progressed, their conversation moved beyond food to their respective journeys in America. Nico's grandparents had immigrated from Crete in the 1950s, starting with a single fishing boat and building a maritime logistics company that now operated throughout the eastern Mediterranean. "I grew up hearing stories about starting over in a new country," he said. "The language barriers, the cultural misunderstandings, the determination to prove yourself worthy of the opportunities America offered. It's harder than people realize," Salama said. "Everyone assumes if you're educated and speak English, integration should be automatic. They don't understand the subtle barriers, the assumptions people make." "Like what?" She told him about the job interviews, the comments about her accent, the suggestion that customer service might be more suitable for her skills. She'd never shared these experiences with anyone except Kemi, but something about Nico's attentive listening made the words flow easily. "That's their loss," he said simply. "Anyone who can't see past an accent to recognize competence doesn't deserve your talents." They walked along the Brooklyn waterfront after dinner, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the East River. The conversation continued effortlessly about their career ambitions, their families back home, their favorite books and movies. "I have a confession," Nico said as they waited for her subway train. "I didn't just happen to notice your name tag at the conference. I'd heard about the Chen logistics transformation from a client who works with specialty food distributors. When I saw you there, I wanted to meet the person behind those innovations. So this was professional networking after all?" "It started that way," he admitted. "But somewhere between the jollof rice and your story about optimizing container routes in Lagos, it became something else." The train arrived, and she paused at the entrance. "What kind of something else?" "The kind where I hope you'll let me take you to that Greek place in Astoria next week." She smiled, stepping onto the train. "I'll think about it." But she was already thinking about it, and the answer was yes. 8 months after her first dinner with Nico, Salama stood before a packed auditorium at the Northeast Supply Chain Excellence Conference in Boston. The invitation to speak had arrived 6 weeks earlier, addressed to Ms. Salama Okafor, Operations Manager, Chen Logistics, with a request for her to present on digital transformation in small-scale logistics operations. Her hands were steady as she adjusted the microphone, looking out at an audience of industry veterans, startup founders, and corporate executives. A year ago, she would have been intimidated by the sea of faces. Today, she felt prepared. "Good morning," she began, her Nigerian accent clear and confident. 18 months ago, I was processing orders manually with paper forms and Excel spreadsheets. Today, I'm going to show you how a $80,000 investment in digital infrastructure generated $2.4 million in new business for a small warehouse in Queens. The presentation went flawlessly. She walked the audience through Chen Logistics transformation, sharing specific metrics, implementation strategies, and lessons learned. During the Q&A session, hands shot up across the auditorium. "How did you convince senior management to invest in unproven technology?" asked a woman from a Fortune 500 company. "What was your biggest implementation challenge?" inquired a startup founder. "Can these principles scale to larger operations?" wondered a consultant from McKinsey. Salama answered each question with the confidence of someone who had lived every aspect of the transformation. She shared failures alongside successes, acknowledged limitations while highlighting opportunities, and spoke with the authority that comes from hands-on experience. After her presentation, she was surrounded by attendees wanting to continue the conversation. Business cards were exchanged, consulting opportunities discussed, and partnership possibilities explored. A reporter from Supply Chain Management Review asked for an interview. A venture capital firm inquired about her interest in advising their portfolio companies. "Exceptional presentation," said Dr. Patricia Williams, a logistics professor from MIT who had been the conference's keynote speaker. "Have you considered pursuing an MBA? With your practical experience and analytical skills, you'd be an ideal candidate for our executive program." The suggestion planted a seed that would grow over the following weeks. But first, there was a celebration dinner with Nico at a quiet Italian restaurant in Boston's North End. "I'm proud of you," he said, raising his wine glass. "Watching you up there today, seeing how the audience responded to your expertise, it was incredible." Their relationship had developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared ambitions. Nico never tried to overshadow her achievements or offer unsolicited advice about her career. Instead, he celebrated her successes and provided steady support during challenging moments. "I keep thinking about what Dr. Williams said," Salama admitted over dessert. "An MBA from MIT would open doors I can't even imagine right now. What's holding you back?" "Time, money, uncertainty about whether I'm ready for that level of academic rigor in a second language. You just presented complex logistics solutions to 300 industry professionals and fielded questions like you'd been doing it for years," Nico pointed out. "If that's not ready, I don't know what is." Back in New York, Salama threw herself into research about executive MBA programs. The application requirements were daunting: GMAT scores, essays, recommendations, interviews, but not insurmountable. Mr. Chen was enthusiastic about supporting her educational goals, offering flexible scheduling and tuition assistance. "You've made this company what it is today," he said when she broached the subject. "Investing in your education is investing in our future." The GMAT preparation consumed her evenings for 3 months. She studied quantitative reasoning in the warehouse break room during lunch, practiced verbal sections on the subway, and worked through practice tests at Nico's apartment while he cooked dinner. "Question 47, she called out one evening, looking up from her prep book. "If a warehouse processes 240 orders per day with 85% accuracy and implements a new system that increases accuracy to 96% while reducing processing time by 30%, what's the net productivity gain?" "Is this a GMAT question, or are you planning another Chen Logistics upgrade?" Nico asked from the kitchen. "Both," she laughed. "I can't help seeing real applications in everything." Her GMAT score was strong, 720, putting her in the 94th percentile. The application essays were more challenging, requiring her to articulate her career, vision, and leadership philosophy in ways she'd never formally considered. "What's your long-term goal?" Nico asked one evening as she struggled with the final essay. "I want to build something," she said slowly, the words forming as she spoke them. "Not just improve existing systems, but create something entirely new, Something that connects African businesses to global markets in ways that current logistics infrastructure doesn't support. That's your essay, he said simply. The MIT interview was conducted via video call with 3 faculty members and an admissions officer. They asked about her technical background, her leadership experience, and her vision for applying MBA knowledge to emerging market challenges. Why MIT specifically? Asked Professor Sarah Chen, the program director. Because MIT doesn't just teach business theory, Salama replied. It teaches innovation. I need to understand not just how current systems work, but how to build the systems that don't exist yet. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. Salama read it 3 times before the words fully registered. We are pleased to offer you admission to the MIT Sloan Executive MBA program. She called her mother first, then Nico, then Mr. Chen. Each conversation was filled with excitement, pride, and anticipation for the challenges ahead. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. Carlos, the warehouse supervisor, who had initially doubted her qualifications, knocked on her office door that afternoon. Heard about MIT, he said, his usual gruff demeanor softened by something that might have been paternal pride. Always knew you were going places, just didn't know how far. I'm not going anywhere, she assured him. The program is designed for working professionals. I'll still be here, still be part of this team. Good, he said. Because this place wouldn't be the same without you. That evening, Salama stood on the warehouse loading dock, watching the last trucks of the day pull away into Queens traffic. 18 months earlier, she had been a desperate job seeker willing to take any position that would pay her bills. Now she was a recognized industry expert, an MIT-bound MBA candidate, and a leader whose innovations had transformed not just one company, but influenced thinking across the logistics sector. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kemi in Lagos. Saw your conference presentation online. You're changing the world, one warehouse at a time. She smiled, typing back, just getting started. Before we continue with Salama's incredible journey to entrepreneurship, I want you to pause and think about this. How many times have you let someone else's opinion of your abilities define your potential? Drop a comment below and share a moment when you proved doubters wrong. Your story might inspire someone else to keep pushing forward when the odds seem stacked against them. The idea crystallized during Salama's second semester at MIT Sloan. She was sitting in Professor Martinez's Global Supply Chain Strategy class, listening to a case study about Alibaba's logistics network in rural China, when the professor posed a question that would change her life. What regions represent the greatest untapped potential for logistics innovation? He asked the class of 40 executives from around the world. Hands went up around the room. Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America. Salama raised her hand. Sub-Saharan Africa. The professor nodded. Elaborate. Africa has the world's youngest population, fastest growing middle class, and most fragmented logistics infrastructure, she said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. Small businesses across the continent are desperate to access global markets, but existing logistics platforms are designed for established economies with reliable infrastructure. There's a massive opportunity to build something specifically for African market conditions. After class, 3 classmates approached her. David Kim from Samsung's supply chain division, Maria Santos from a Brazilian logistics startup, and James Mitchell from FedEx's emerging markets team. Have you thought about actually building this? David asked. That conversation led to late-night sessions in the MIT library, where Salama began sketching out a business model for what would become AfriConnect Logistics. The platform would focus on 3 key innovations: mobile-first design, for markets with limited computer access, flexible payment systems, accommodating various currencies and banking infrastructures, and modular services that small businesses could adopt incrementally. Her MIT professors were encouraging but realistic about the challenges. African logistics is notoriously difficult, warned Professor Chen during office hours. Infrastructure limitations, regulatory complexity, currency volatility, these aren't problems you can solve with software alone. I'm not trying to solve them with software, Salma replied. I'm trying to work around them, build systems that function despite infrastructure limitations, not because of infrastructure perfection. She spent her winter break in Lagos, conducting market research that would form the foundation of her business plan. She interviewed 127 small business owners across Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya, documenting their logistics challenges and current workarounds. The patterns were clear. Small manufacturers struggled to find reliable shipping partners for international orders. Retailers couldn't access real-time inventory data from suppliers. Import, export documentation was handled manually, creating delays and errors. Most critically, existing logistics platforms required upfront investments and technical capabilities that small African businesses couldn't afford. What if there was a platform that let you start with basic services and add capabilities as your business grew? She asked Adebayo Ogundimu, who ran a textile business in Lagos's Alaba market. His eyes lit up. That would change everything. Right now, we either use expensive international services or unreliable local ones. Nothing in between. Back at MIT, Salama refined her business model with input from her study group. The platform would offer 3 tiers: basic mobile app for order tracking and communication, professional inventory management and automated documentation, and enterprise full supply chain integration and analytics. The genius is in the progression, observed Maria Santos during one of their weekly meetings. Businesses can prove the value at each level before investing in the next. Salama's thesis advisor, Dr. Patricia Williams, helped her connect with MIT's entrepreneurship ecosystem. She attended pitch competitions, networked with venture capitalists, and refined her presentation skills in front of increasingly sophisticated audiences. The breakthrough came during MIT's annual $100,000 entrepreneurship competition. Salama's presentation on AfriConnect Logistics won second place and $25,000 in seed funding. More importantly, it caught the attention of Sarah Chen, a partner at Meridian Ventures who specialized in emerging market investments. "I've been looking for someone with your combination of technical skills and market knowledge," Sarah said after the competition. "Would you be interested in discussing this further?" The meeting with Meridian Ventures was both encouraging and sobering. Sarah was enthusiastic about the market opportunity, but realistic about the execution challenges. African logistics is a graveyard of well-intentioned startups, she warned. "What makes you think you can succeed where others have failed?" "Because I'm not trying to impose Western logistics models on African markets," Salama replied. "I'm building something designed specifically for how business actually works in Lagos, Nairobi, and Accra." Sarah offered $150,000 in pre-seed funding in exchange for 15% equity, contingent on Salama demonstrating market traction within 6 months. It was enough to build a minimum viable product and test it with real customers. Salama's decision to leave Chen Logistics was one of the hardest of her life. Mr. Chen had become more than a boss. He was a mentor who had believed in her when no one else would. "I understand," he said, when she explained her plans. "You've outgrown what we can offer here, but remember, this will always be your home." Lourdes was more emotional. "You sure about this? Starting a business is risky, especially in a market you haven't lived in for years." "That's exactly why I need to do it," Salama replied. "I understand both worlds, the challenges African businesses face and the solutions that technology can provide." Her last day at Chen Logistics was bittersweet. Carlos presented her with a custom hard hat emblazoned with CEO and the warehouse team's signatures. "For when you're building your empire," he said gruffly. Nico helped her set up a home office in his apartment's spare bedroom. They'd been living together for 6 months, their relationship deepening as they supported each other's career ambitions. "You sure you're okay with me turning your guest room into Startup Central?" she asked, surveying boxes of equipment and whiteboards covered with business model diagrams. "I'm excited to watch you build something amazing," he replied, kissing her forehead. "Besides, I've always wanted to date a CEO." The first 3 months were a blur of 18-hour days. Salama coded the initial platform herself, drawing on her computer science background and logistics experience. She hired 2 freelance developers in Lagos, Kemi's brother Tunde and his business partner Chidi, to help with mobile optimization and local market customization. The platform's first test came with Adebayo's textile business. Salama flew to Lagos to personally oversee the implementation, working alongside Adebayo's team to integrate AfriConnect with their existing processes. "This is exactly what we needed," Adebayo said, after successfully processing his first international order through the platform. "Simple enough for my staff to learn quickly, but powerful enough to handle complex shipments. Word spread quickly through Lagos's business networks. Within 2 months, AfriConnect had 15 active users across Nigeria and Ghana. The numbers were small, but the engagement was high. Businesses were using the platform daily and recommending it to partners. Salama's phone rang at 3 a.m. New York time. It was Tunde calling from Lagos. "We have a problem," he said. "A good problem. We just got 50 new sign-up requests in the last week. The servers can't handle the traffic." She smiled, already reaching for her laptop. "Then let's upgrade the servers." The rejection emails started arriving in March, just as AfriConnect's user base hit 200 active businesses across 5 African countries. Salama had spent 2 months pitching to venture capital firms across New York and Boston, armed with impressive growth metrics and glowing testimonials from early customers. "Thank you for your presentation. While we find the African logistics market interesting, we don't feel it aligns with our current investment thesis. We appreciate your time but have decided to pass on this opportunity. Best of luck with your venture. The market opportunity is compelling, but we have concerns about execution risk in emerging markets." Each rejection stung, but the pattern was becoming clear. American investors talked about Africa as if it were a single country plagued by insurmountable challenges. They saw risk where Salama saw opportunity, problems where she saw solutions waiting to be implemented. "Maybe we're approaching this wrong," Nico suggested one evening as Salama stared at her laptop screen, reading another polite but firm rejection. "What if you looked for investors who actually understand the markets you're serving?" The idea led her to research African-focused investment funds. She discovered a growing ecosystem of investors specifically targeting African startups, some based in Lagos and Nairobi, others in London and New York, but with deep African market experience. Her first breakthrough came through an unexpected connection. Dr. Williams forwarded an email from Kwame Asante, a Ghanaian-American investor, who had built and sold 2 successful fintech companies in West Africa. "I've been following AfriConnect's progress through MIT's alumni network," Kwame wrote. "Would you be interested in discussing your expansion plans? I think there might be synergies with some of my portfolio companies." The video call with Kwame was different from every other investor conversation she'd had. He didn't ask about political stability or infrastructure challenges. Instead, he wanted to understand her customer acquisition strategy, her approach to local partnerships, and her plans for handling multiple currencies. "The beauty of your model is its simplicity," he said after she walked through the platform's features. "You're not trying to rebuild African logistics infrastructure. You're working with what exists and making it more efficient." Kwame introduced her to Amara Investments, a $50 million fund focused on African technology companies. The managing partner, Fatima Al-Rashid, was a former McKinsey consultant who had spent 5 years building supply chain solutions across the Middle East and Africa. "We've been looking for exactly this type of opportunity," Fatima said during their first meeting at Amara's Manhattan offices. "A founder with deep market knowledge, proven traction, and a scalable business model." But even with interested investors, the due diligence process was grueling. Fatima's team spent 6 weeks analyzing AfriConnect's financials, interviewing customers, and stress testing the technology platform. They wanted to understand everything from customer retention rates to cybersecurity protocols. "Why is this taking so long?" Salama asked Kwame during one of their weekly check-ins. "We have customers, we have revenue, we have growth. What more do they need to see?" "They're not just investing in your current business," Kwame explained. "They're investing in your ability to scale across a continent with 54 different countries, currencies, and regulatory environments. That requires serious due diligence." The breakthrough moment came when one of AfriConnect's customers, a coffee exporter in Kenya, named Samuel Kipratish, landed a major contract with a specialty roaster in Portland, Oregon. The entire transaction, from initial order to final delivery, was managed through AfriConnect's platform. "This is exactly the kind of success story we need to see," Fatima told Salama during their final due diligence meeting. "A small African business accessing global markets through your platform, generating real economic impact." Samuel's success attracted attention from other coffee exporters across East Africa. Within 2 weeks, AfriConnect had signed up 12 new agricultural exporters. each bringing their own network of farmer suppliers and international buyers. The network effects are starting to kick in, observed Tunde during one of their weekly team calls from Lagos. New customers are bringing their partners onto the platform, creating organic growth. Amara Investments offered $2.5 million in series of funding for 25% equity. The terms were fair, the investors understood the market, and the funding would allow AfriConnect to expand across 10 additional African countries within 18 months. But Salama's biggest validation came from an unexpected source. She received an email from Bryce Langford, the CEO who had dismissed her accent, and suggested customer service might be more suitable for her skills. "I've been following AfriConnect's progress through industry publications," he wrote. "Impressive work. Would you be interested in discussing a potential partnership? Logiflow is looking to expand into emerging markets." She stared at the email for a full minute before showing it to Nico. "Are you going to respond?" he asked. "Eventually," she said. "But not yet. I want to be in a position of strength when we have that conversation." The series of funding closed in June, exactly 18 months after Salama had left Chen Logistics. The announcement generated coverage in TechCrunch, VentureBeat, and African Business Magazine. Suddenly, everyone wanted to understand how a Nigerian-American woman had built a logistics platform that was transforming small business operations across Africa. The key insight was understanding that African businesses don't need Western-style logistics infrastructure, she explained to a reporter from Forbes. They need solutions designed for African market conditions, mobile-first, flexible, and affordable. The funding allowed Salama to hire her first full-time employees. She brought Tunde and Chidi to New York as co-founders, established offices in Lagos and Nairobi, and began recruiting local teams in each target market. "We're not just building a technology platform," she told her new team during their first all-to-hands meeting. "We're building infrastructure that will enable thousands of African businesses to compete globally." The growth was exponential. By the end of the year, AfriConnect had 1,200 active customers across 12 countries, processing over $15 million in annual transaction volume. More importantly, the platform was generating real economic impact. Small businesses were accessing new markets, creating jobs, and building sustainable growth. Salama's phone rang late one evening as she worked in her home office. It was Adebayo calling from Lagos. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "Because of AfriConnect, my business has tripled in size. I'm employing 20 people now, and we're shipping to customers in 15 countries. That's incredible, Adebayo. You built that success yourself, maybe, but you gave me the tools to do it. You saw potential where others saw problems." After they hung up, Salama sat quietly in her office, surrounded by whiteboards covered with expansion plans and growth projections. 2 years earlier, she had been crying in a bathroom after being dismissed for her accent. Now she was building a company that was changing lives across an entire continent. Her laptop chimed with a new email notification. Another investor inquiry, another partnership proposal, another opportunity to scale her impact. She smiled and opened the message. There was still so much work to do. The call came at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in September. Salama was reviewing quarterly reports when her phone buzzed with an international number she didn't recognize. "Miss Okafor, this is Dr. Amina Hassan from the African Development Bank in Abidjan. We've been following AfriConnect's progress, and we'd like to discuss a potential partnership." The African Development Bank was interested in using AfriConnect as the logistics backbone for their small and medium enterprise development initiative, a $200 million program designed to help African businesses access international markets. The partnership would provide AfriConnect with institutional credibility and access to thousands of pre-qualified businesses across the continent. "We've evaluated dozens of logistics platforms," Dr. Hassan explained during their video call later that week. "AfriConnect is the only one designed specifically for African market conditions. Your mobile-first approach and flexible payment systems align perfectly with our development goals." The partnership required AfriConnect to expand into 15 new countries within 12 months, an ambitious timeline that would test every aspect of their operations. Salama assembled her leadership team for an emergency strategy session. "This is our moonshot moment," she told Tunde, Chidi, and her newly hired VP of Operations, Jennifer. "Osei, a former McKinsey consultant who had returned to Ghana to build African technology companies. We either scale successfully and become the dominant logistics platform across Africa, or we overextend and collapse. The expansion strategy was methodical but aggressive. Rather than trying to establish operations in all 15 countries simultaneously, they identified 3 regional hubs: Lagos for West Africa, Nairobi for East Africa, and Johannesburg for Southern Africa. Each hub would serve as a launching point for expansion into neighboring countries. Jennifer led the West African expansion from Lagos, leveraging existing relationships with Nigerian businesses to establish partnerships in Ghana, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. The cultural and linguistic similarities made expansion relatively straightforward. Businesses in Accra operated similarly to those in Lagos, with comparable challenges and opportunities. The beauty of West Africa is the shared commercial culture, Jennifer reported during their weekly leadership call. A textile manufacturer in Lagos can easily understand the needs of a textile manufacturer in Accra. The business models translate directly. East African expansion proved more complex. Tunde relocated to Nairobi to establish the regional office, but quickly discovered that Kenyan, Tanzanian, and Ugandan markets each had distinct characteristics. Kenya's tech-savvy business environment embraced Africonnect's digital features, while Tanzania's more traditional commercial culture required additional training and support. We need to customize our onboarding process for each market, Tunde explained during a strategy review. What works in Nairobi doesn't necessarily work in Dar es Salaam. The solution was to hire local market managers in each country, experienced logistics professionals who understood both local business practices and Africonnect's technology platform. These managers became the bridge between global technology and local market needs. Chidi took on the most challenging assignment: Southern African expansion. The region's more developed infrastructure and established logistics providers meant Africonnect faced direct competition from international platforms like DHL and FedEx. We can't compete on infrastructure, Chidi reported from Johannesburg. But we can compete on understanding. South African businesses want to trade with the rest of Africa, but existing platforms treat intra-African trade as an afterthought. The breakthrough came when Africonnect signed a partnership with the Southern African Development Community (SADC) to facilitate trade between member countries. The platform's ability to handle multiple currencies and regulatory requirements made it ideal for businesses wanting to expand across regional borders. By December, Africonnect was processing transactions in 18 African countries, with over 5,000 active business customers. The platform had facilitated $78 million in trade volume, connecting African businesses to markets across 6 continents. But the real measure of success was the stories emerging from their customer base. Fatou Diallo, a shea butter producer in Burkina Faso, had grown her business from a local cooperative to an international supplier serving cosmetics companies in France and the United States. Moses Wanjiku, a coffee farmer in Kenya, was now selling directly to specialty roasters in Seattle and Amsterdam, bypassing traditional middlemen and tripling his profit margins. These aren't just business success stories, Salama told the audience at the Africa Tech Summit in Cape Town. They're economic empowerment stories. Every small business that accesses global markets through Africonnect creates jobs, generates tax revenue, and builds prosperity in their communities. The summit presentation attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Representatives from the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, and several European development agencies approached Africonnect about potential partnerships. The platform was being recognized not just as a successful startup, but as critical infrastructure for African economic development. "You've built something remarkable," said Dr. Kofi Antwi, Ghana's Minister of Trade and Industry, after her presentation. Africonnect is exactly the kind of innovation Africa needs to compete in the global economy. The recognition brought new challenges. Media attention increased dramatically, with feature stories in The Economist, Financial Times, and CNN International. Salama found herself fielding interview requests from journalists who wanted to understand how a Nigerian-American woman had built Africa's fastest-growing logistics platform. "The secret isn't technology," she explained to a BBC reporter. "The secret is understanding that African businesses are sophisticated, ambitious, and capable of competing globally. They just needed tools designed for their specific needs." The success also attracted acquisition interest from major logistics companies. FedEx, DHL, and UPS all reached out about potential partnerships or buyouts. The offers were substantial, some exceeding $100 million, but Salama wasn't interested in selling. "We're just getting started," she told her board of directors during a quarterly review. "AfriConnect has the potential to become the Amazon of African logistics. Why would we sell that vision for short-term gains?" Her personal life had evolved alongside the business. Nico proposed during a quiet dinner at their favorite Nigerian restaurant in Brooklyn, presenting the ring alongside a business plan for expanding AfriConnect into Mediterranean markets through his family's shipping connections. "I want to build this future with you," he said, taking her hand. "Not just as your partner, but as your co-conspirator in changing how the world thinks about African business." The engagement party was held at Chen Logistics Warehouse in Queens, with Mr. Chen, Lord, Carlos, and the entire team celebrating alongside MIT classmates, investors, and AfriConnect employees who had flown in from across Africa. "2 years ago, you were processing our orders manually," Carlos said during his toast. "Now you're processing orders for half of Africa, but you're still the same person who listened to our ideas and made this place better." As 2023 ended, AfriConnect was valued at $150 million and processing over $200 million in annual transaction volume. The platform had become essential infrastructure for thousands of African businesses, enabling economic growth that rippled through communities across the continent. But for Salama, the most meaningful metric was simpler: the number of dreams that AfriConnect had helped make possible. The invitation arrived on elegant cream-colored paper with gold embossing. "The Manhattan Logistics Innovation Summit cordially invites Ms. Salama Okafor, CEO of AfriConnect Logistics, to deliver the keynote address on the future of global supply chain integration." The event was being held at the Plaza Hotel, the same building where she had once walked past the entrance, unable to afford even a cup of coffee from their lobby cafe. 3 years had passed since her humiliating interview with Bryce Langford. AfriConnect now operated in 22 African countries, employed over 300 people, and had facilitated more than $500 million in trade volume. The company's success had earned Salama recognition as one of Forbes 30 Under 30 and a spot on Time magazine's Next Generation Leaders list. "Are you nervous?" Nico asked as they rode the elevator to their suite at the plaza. They had married 6 months earlier in a ceremony that blended Nigerian and Greek traditions, with guests flying in from Lagos, Athens, and everywhere in between. "Not nervous," Salama replied, adjusting the emerald green dress she'd chosen for the evening's welcome reception. "Excited. This industry dismissed me 3 years ago. Now they're asking me to show them the future." The reception buzzed with conversations about autonomous vehicles, blockchain integration, and artificial intelligence applications in supply chain management. Salama moved through the crowd, greeting old colleagues from her MIT program and meeting new faces from across the logistics industry. Salama Okafor called out Dr. Patricia Williams, her former thesis advisor. "I've been following AfriConnect's progress. Absolutely remarkable what you've built." "Thank you, Dr. Williams. Your guidance during the early days was invaluable." "I have to ask, have you seen the speaker list? Bryce Langford from Logiflow is presenting tomorrow on lessons from startup failures. Quite a different trajectory from yours." Salama's stomach tightened slightly. She had deliberately avoided researching other speakers, focusing instead on her own presentation. "I hadn't noticed. How is Logiflow doing?" Dr. Williams lowered her voice. "Not well. They burned through their Series B funding trying to expand too quickly. Word is they're looking for a buyer, but there aren't many interested parties." Across the room, Salama spotted a familiar figure, older, less confident than she remembered, but unmistakably Bryce Langford. He was speaking with a small group of investors, his gestures more animated than the polite attention he was receiving suggested was warranted. "That's him," she murmured to Nico, who had joined her with 2 glasses of champagne. Nico studied Bryce for a moment. "He looks desperate. He looks like someone whose assumptions about the world have been proven wrong." The next morning's opening session featured a panel on emerging market opportunities in global logistics. Salama sat in the front row, taking notes as speakers discussed the challenges and potential of expanding into developing economies, the infrastructure limitations in Africa, make it nearly impossible to establish reliable logistics networks, argued one panelist, a consultant from Kinsey. The regulatory complexity alone is prohibitive for most companies. Salama smiled, thinking of the thousands of African businesses that were thriving precisely because AfriConnect had solved those exact challenges. Bryce's presentation was scheduled for 11 a.m., just before the lunch break. Salama found herself curious about what lessons he would share from Logiflow's struggles. She took a seat in the middle of the auditorium, close enough to observe but not so prominent as to be distracting. Bryce took the stage wearing a navy suit that looked expensive but somehow ill-fitting. His usual confidence had been replaced by something more tentative, the swagger of his earlier years tempered by recent failures. 3 years ago, Logiflow was the darling of the logistics startup world, he began. We had raised $25 million, signed Fortune 500 clients, and were featured on the cover of TechCrunch. Today, I'm here to talk about what went wrong. His presentation was a catalog of strategic mistakes, expanding too quickly into markets they didn't. To understand, prioritizing growth over profitability, and failing to listen to customer feedback. The audience listened politely, but Salama could sense their discomfort with the raw honesty of his admissions. Our biggest mistake was arrogance, Bryce continued. We thought we could impose our vision of how logistics should work, without understanding how it actually works in different markets. We built solutions for problems that didn't exist while ignoring problems that desperately needed solving. The irony wasn't lost on Salama. 3 years earlier, Bryce had dismissed her precisely because she understood markets he didn't. Now he was acknowledging that market understanding was the key to success. During the Q&A session, a venture capitalist asked, "What would you do differently if you could start over?" Bryce paused, his eyes scanning the audience before landing briefly on Salama. "I would hire people who understood markets I didn't. I would listen to perspectives that challenged my assumptions. I would recognize that diversity isn't just politically correct, it's strategically essential." After his presentation, Bryce lingered near the stage, speaking with a few audience members. Salama watched him from across the room, noting how different he seemed from the confident CEO who had dismissed her accent and suggested customer service might be more suitable. "Are you going to talk to him?" Nico asked, joining her near the back of the auditorium. "Not yet," she replied. "Let him come to me, if he wants to." The lunch break provided networking opportunities, and Salama found herself surrounded by executives eager to understand AfriConnect's success in African markets. The conversations were markedly different from her early job interviews. Now people wanted to learn from her expertise rather than question her qualifications. "How did you identify the opportunity in African logistics?" asked Sarah Chen from Meridian Ventures, the same investor who had initially passed on AfriConnect. "I didn't identify it," Salama replied. "I lived it. I understood the challenges because I had experienced them personally." "We're seeing incredible growth in African tech investments," Sarah continued. "Would AfriConnect be interested in discussing expansion funding?" The conversation was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Excuse me, Salama?" She turned to see Bryce Langford standing behind her, his expression uncertain but determined. The small group around her fell silent, sensing the tension in the moment. "Bryce," she said evenly, "I enjoyed your presentation. Very honest. Thank you. I was wondering if we could speak privately for a moment?" Salama glanced at Nico, who nodded slightly. "Of course. There's a quiet corner over there." As they walked away from the crowd, Salama felt a strange mix of anticipation and calm. 3 years earlier, this man had the power to crush her dreams with a few dismissive words. Now their positions were reversed, and she was curious to see what he would do with this moment. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed for Salama's keynote presentation. 800 industry leaders filled every seat, with overflow attendees standing along the walls. The stage featured a massive LED screen displaying the AfriConnect logo alongside the summit's theme, connecting global commerce through innovation. Backstage, Salama reviewed her notes one final time. Her presentation would cover AfriConnect's journey from startup to continental platform, but more importantly, it would challenge the industry's assumptions about emerging markets and the future of global logistics. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator announced, "please welcome the CEO of AfriConnect Logistics and our keynote speaker, Salama Okafor." The applause was warm and sustained as Salama walked onto the stage. She wore a tailored black blazer with traditional Nigerian embroidery along the collar, a subtle nod to her heritage that had become her signature look at industry events. 3 years ago, I sat in a job interview where I was told that my accent made me unsuitable for client-facing roles, she began, her voice clear and confident. The interviewer suggested that customer service might be more appropriate for someone like me. A murmur rippled through the audience. Several people glanced toward where Bryce sat in the third row, his face flushed with obvious discomfort. Today, I want to talk about what happens when we move beyond assumptions and start listening to markets we don't understand. When we recognize that the future of global logistics isn't about imposing Western solutions on emerging economies, it's about building solutions that work for how business actually operates in Lagos, Nairobi, and Accra. The presentation screen displayed a map of Africa with thousands of glowing dots representing AfriConnect's active customers. The visual was striking. A continent often portrayed as disconnected was revealed as a vibrant network of commercial activity. When we launched AfriConnect, conventional wisdom said African logistics was too complex, too fragmented, too risky for a technology platform. Infrastructure was unreliable. Regulatory environments were unpredictable. Payment systems were incompatible with global standards. She clicked to the next slide, showing AfriConnect's growth metrics: 22 countries, 8,000 active customers, $500 million in facilitated trade volume. Conventional wisdom was wrong, not because these challenges don't exist, but because we approached them as design constraints rather than insurmountable obstacles. We built mobile-first solutions for markets where smartphones are more common than computers. We created flexible payment systems that work with mobile money, traditional banking, and cryptocurrency. We designed workflows that function despite infrastructure limitations, not because of infrastructure perfection. The audience was completely engaged now, leaning forward as Salama shared specific examples of AfriConnect's innovations. She told the story of Amara Textiles in Ghana, which had grown from a local supplier to an international manufacturer, serving fashion brands in Europe and North America. Amara's success isn't unique, Salama continued. It's representative of thousands of African businesses that are sophisticated, ambitious, and globally competitive. They just needed tools designed for their specific needs rather than adapted from solutions built for different markets. She clicked to a slide showing comparative data: AfriConnect's customer retention rates, transaction success rates, and growth metrics compared to traditional logistics platforms operating in emerging markets. The results speak for themselves. When you build solutions that truly understand local market conditions, you don't just serve customers better, you unlock economic potential that was always there but never properly supported. The presentation's most powerful moment came when Salama shared video testimonials from AfriConnect customers. Samuel Kipratish, the Kenyan coffee exporter, spoke about how the platform had enabled him to sell directly to specialty roasters worldwide. Fatou Diallo described growing her shea butter cooperative from 12 women to over 200, all accessing international markets through AfriConnect. These aren't just business success stories, Salama said as the videos concluded. They're economic empowerment stories. Every small business that accesses global markets creates jobs, generates tax revenue, and builds prosperity in their communities. Technology platforms like AfriConnect aren't just connecting businesses. We're connecting dreams to opportunities. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause. Several people stood, and within moments the entire ballroom was on its feet, delivering a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. But the real opportunity is just beginning, Salama continued as the applause subsided. Africa has the world's youngest population, fastest growing middle class, and most dynamic entrepreneurial ecosystem. The businesses we're serving today will be the multinational corporations of tomorrow. The question isn't whether Africa will become a major force in global commerce. It's whether the rest of the world will be ready to engage as equal partners. She concluded with a challenge to the audience. I encourage everyone in this room to examine your own assumptions about emerging markets. Ask yourself whether you're seeing obstacles or opportunities, whether you're building solutions for markets as they are or as you think they should be. The future of global logistics will be written by companies that understand this distinction. The final applause was even more enthusiastic than the first. As Salama left the stage, she was immediately surrounded by executives wanting to discuss partnerships, investments, and collaboration opportunities. "Extraordinary presentation," said Dr. James Morrison, CEO of Global Logistics Alliance. "We'd love to explore how GLA could support AfriConnect's expansion into new markets." "Brilliant insights," added Maria Rodriguez from the World Bank's International Finance Corporation. "We're launching a $500 million initiative to support African trade infrastructure. AfriConnect would be a perfect partner." The networking session that followed was unlike anything Salama had experienced. Instead of trying to convince skeptical investors about African market potential, she found herself fielding serious partnership proposals from major corporations, development organizations, and government agencies. "The paradigm has shifted," observed Jennifer Osei, who had flown in from Lagos for the summit. 3 years ago, we were explaining why African logistics mattered. Now everyone wants to understand how to participate." The shift was evident in the media coverage as well. Reporters from Bloomberg, Reuters, and the Financial Times requested interviews. The Wall Street Journal wanted to feature AfriConnect in their Future of Business series. CNN International was planning a documentary about African tech entrepreneurs. "How does it feel to be the face of African logistics innovation?" asked a reporter from TechCrunch. "It feels like responsibility," Salama replied. "Every success story from AfriConnect opens doors for other African entrepreneurs. Every partnership we announce changes how investors think about African market potential. I'm not just building a company, I'm helping to rewrite the narrative about African business capabilities." The day's most meaningful moment came during the closing reception. Dr. Patricia Williams approached with a young woman in tow, a recent MIT graduate from Ethiopia who was building a fintech platform for East African farmers. "Salama, I'd like you to meet Hanan Yusuf. She's following in your footsteps, building solutions for markets that traditional investors don't understand." As Salama shook Hanan's hand, she saw her own journey reflected in the young woman's determined expression. The cycle was continuing. African entrepreneurs building solutions for African challenges, proving that innovation comes from understanding, not assumptions. The quiet corner of the Plaza Hotel's lobby felt worlds away from the bustling reception. Salama sat across from Bryce Langford in a leather armchair, studying the man who had once dismissed her so casually. 3 years had aged him more than the calendar suggested. His hair showed gray at the temples, and his eyes carried the weight of failure. "I owe you an apology," Bryce began, his voice lacking the confident tone she remembered. "What I said during your interview was inexcusable. I was arrogant, prejudiced, and completely wrong about your capabilities." Salama remained silent, allowing him to continue. "I've spent the last year watching AfriConnect's success while Logiflow collapsed around me. Every article about your company, every award you've won, every milestone you've achieved, it's been a reminder of the opportunity I missed and the person I was." "What opportunity did you miss?" Salama asked, her tone neutral but curious. "The chance to learn from someone who understood markets I didn't. The opportunity to build something meaningful instead of chasing venture capital headlines. The possibility of creating real value instead of just impressive PowerPoint presentations." Bryce leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I've been following your journey, and I understand now what I couldn't see then. You weren't just another job candidate. You were exactly what Logiflow needed. Someone who understood that successful logistics isn't about imposing solutions, it's about understanding problems." "And what do you want from me now?" Salama asked directly. "Nothing," Bryce replied, surprising her. "I'm not here to ask for a job or propose a partnership. I'm here because I needed to acknowledge what I did and who I was. You deserved better than the treatment you received, and I wanted you to know that I understand that now." Salama studied his face, searching for signs of manipulation or self-serving motivation. She found only genuine remorse and hard-earned humility. "I appreciate your apology," she said finally, "but I need you to understand something. That interview didn't break me, it redirected me. Your dismissal forced me to find people who valued my contributions. Your prejudice led me to build something that proved you wrong in the most comprehensive way possible." "I know," Bryce said quietly, "and I'm glad it did. The world is better because you built AfriConnect instead of working for Logiflow. What will you do now?" "I'm starting over. Smaller scale, Different approach. I'm consulting with startups on market entry strategies, helping them avoid the mistakes I made. It's humbling work, but it's honest work. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history settling between them. For what it's worth, Bryce added, your presentation today was the best I've ever heard at one of these conferences. You didn't just share business metrics, you shared a vision for how commerce can create opportunity. That's leadership. Thank you, Salama said, standing to leave. I hope your new venture goes well. As she walked away, Salama felt a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. The confrontation hadn't been dramatic or vindictive, just two professionals acknowledging how their paths had diverged and what they had learned along the way. She found Nico waiting near the hotel's main entrance, scrolling through his phone with a smile. Good conversation? He asked, looking up as she approached. Necessary conversation, she replied. He apologized. Genuinely, I think. How do you feel about that? Satisfied. Not because he suffered, but because he learned. Growth is more valuable than revenge. They walked through Central Park as the sun set over Manhattan, the city's energy humming around them. Nico seemed unusually quiet, occasionally checking his watch with nervous energy. Are you okay? Salama asked as they reached the Bethesda fountain. You've been distracted all evening. Actually, I have something I want to discuss with you, Nico said, stopping near the fountain's edge. About our future. Salama's heart skipped, wondering if he was having second thoughts about their marriage or her demanding career schedule. I've been thinking about what you said in your presentation today, he continued. About AfriConnect connecting dreams to opportunities. About building something that creates lasting impact. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather portfolio. I want to show you something I've been working on. Inside the portfolio were architectural drawings and business plans for the AfriConnect Foundation, a non-profit organization focused on providing logistics training and technology access to underserved communities across Africa. I've been developing this for 6 months, Nico explained. The foundation would offer free training programs, provide technology grants to small businesses, and create mentorship networks connecting successful African entrepreneurs with emerging ones. Salama studied the documents, her excitement growing as she understood the scope of his vision. The initial funding would come from AfriConnect's profits, he continued. But I've already secured commitments from several other donors. The World Bank is interested in partnering. MIT wants to provide curriculum development. Even some of your former competitors want to contribute. This is incredible, Salama said, looking up from the plans. But why didn't you discuss this with me earlier? Because I wanted it to be perfect before I presented it. Because I know how much AfriConnect means to you, and I wanted to show you how we could extend that impact beyond just business success. Nico took her hands, his expression serious but hopeful. Salama, you've built something extraordinary. You've proven that African businesses can compete globally when given the right tools. Now I want to help you ensure that those tools reach everyone who needs them, not just those who can afford them. You wanted to democratize access to global markets, she said, understanding the full implications. I want to help you change the world, he replied simply. That evening, they returned to their hotel suite and spent hours refining the foundation's mission and structure. By midnight, they had outlined a comprehensive program that would train 10,000 African entrepreneurs over 5 years, provide technology grants to 1,000 small businesses, and create a mentorship network spanning all 54 African countries. We'll announce it at next year's summit, Salama decided. Give us 12 months to establish operations and recruit partners. Are you sure you want to take this on? Nico asked. Running AfriConnect and launching a foundation simultaneously will be incredibly demanding. Salama thought about her journey, from desperate job seeker to successful CEO, from dismissed candidate to keynote speaker, from someone seeking opportunity to someone creating opportunities for others. 3 years ago, I was crying in a bathroom because someone told me I wasn't suitable for their company, she said. Today, I'm planning to transform how an entire continent accesses global markets. If that's not proof that we should never limit our ambitions, I don't know what is. The foundation would become her legacy, not just the business success of AfriConnect, but the lasting impact of connecting African dreams to global opportunities. As we reach the end of Salama's incredible journey, I want you to take a moment to reflect on the power of perseverance and self-belief. If this story moved you, if it challenged your thinking about potential and prejudice, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your engagement helps stories like Salama's reach people who are facing their own moments of doubt and dismissal. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one assumption about your own capabilities that you're ready to challenge? What dream have you been putting off because someone else's opinion made you doubt yourself? Your story matters, and sharing it might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Salama's story teaches us profound lessons that extend far beyond business success. Her journey from a humiliated job candidate to the CEO of a continental logistics empire offers insights that can transform how we approach challenges, setbacks, and opportunities. The first lesson is perhaps the most crucial. Your voice doesn't need anyone else's approval to be valuable. When Bryce Langford mocked Salama's accent and suggested she pursue customer service instead of logistics, he revealed his own limitations, not hers. The very thing he saw as a weakness, her different perspective shaped by Nigerian experience, became her greatest strength in understanding markets he couldn't comprehend. Too often, we allow other people's narrow vision to define our potential. Salama's success reminds us that authenticity isn't just about being true to yourself. It's about recognizing that your unique perspective is precisely what the world needs. The second lesson centers on the transformative power of finding the right environment. At Chen Logistics, Salama didn't change who she was to fit in. She found people who valued what she brought to the table. Mr. Chen, Lourdes, and Carlos didn't see her accent as a liability or her foreign experience as irrelevant. They saw her capabilities and gave her space to demonstrate them. This teaches us that rejection often isn't about our inadequacy. It's about mismatched environments. The key is to keep searching until you find the place where your talents are recognized and nurtured. Salama's relationship with Nico illustrates another vital principle: healthy partnerships amplify rather than diminish individual strengths. Nico never tried to fix Salama or suggest she tone down her ambitions. Instead, he celebrated her achievements and found ways to support her vision. When he developed the AfriConnect Foundation, he wasn't trying to redirect her energy. He was helping her extend her impact. True partnership means building something together that neither person could create alone. The story also demonstrates the importance of turning pain into purpose. The humiliation Salama experienced in that interview could have crushed her spirit or convinced her to abandon her dreams. Instead, she used it as fuel for building something extraordinary. Every rejection, every dismissive comment, every suggestion that she wasn't suitable became evidence that the existing system needed to change. She didn't just overcome obstacles, she transformed them into stepping stones toward creating opportunities for others facing similar challenges. Perhaps most importantly, Salama's journey shows us that success isn't just about personal achievement. It's about expanding possibilities for others. AfriConnect didn't just make Salama wealthy, it enabled thousands of African businesses to access global markets. The platform created jobs, generated economic growth, and proved that innovation comes from understanding real problems rather than imposing predetermined solutions. Her success opened doors for other African entrepreneurs and changed how investors think about emerging market potential. The confrontation with Bryce Langford offers another powerful lesson about grace and growth. When given the opportunity for revenge, Salama chose understanding instead. She recognized that his apology represented genuine learning, and she responded with dignity rather than bitterness. This teaches us that our response to those who have wronged us says more about our character than their original actions ever could. Finally, Salama's story reminds us that the future belongs to those who build bridges rather than walls. In a world increasingly divided by nationality, race, and economic status, she created connections that transcended these boundaries. AfriConnect didn't just move goods across borders, it moved dreams, ambitions, and possibilities. The platform proved that when we focus on what unites us rather than what divides us, we can create value that benefits everyone. If you're facing your own moment of doubt, remember Salama's journey. Remember that the person who dismisses your potential today might be watching your success tomorrow. Remember that your unique perspective isn't a liability to be hidden, it's an asset to be leveraged. Remember that rejection often redirects us toward better opportunities, and that the right environment will value what others overlook. Most importantly, remember that your dreams are valid, regardless of who believes in them. Salama didn't need Bryce Langford's approval to build AfriConnect. She didn't need venture capitalists to validate her vision before pursuing it. She needed only her own determination and the willingness to prove her worth through action rather than words. Your accent, your background, your different way of seeing the world. These aren't obstacles to overcome. They're advantages to embrace. The world needs what you have to offer, even if it doesn't realize it yet. So subscribe to this channel for more stories of triumph over adversity. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration. And remember, the best revenge against those who underestimate you isn't anger. It's success that speaks so loudly they can't help but listen. Your journey starts now. Make it count.